right, I'm gonna pull up Jenna's course visit form and let's figure out what goes where. So describe the course and students. She has endocrine, 2-year pre-professional, 38 students in the class. They absorb and listen, they're receptive to questions. So we're saying that this goes in knowing and valuing students, 1B, right? So I'm just going to copy and paste that. This is such a long form. I don't know if there's a better way to do that part of it either, but all right. So what are your goals for this lesson?
1C.
B. We'll cover what acne is, how to treat it. I think that, right? That's the most important part.
Yep.
What are the drugs? So I'm gonna pull this part. I don't think it has to be all of it, but I think this is the most important part there about what's going to be covered in the lecture. And this is 1C. Okay. Coming back up. So how does this lesson reinforce your students' previous learning? How will it aid in future learning? So we're thinking about this spectrum of learning and how this fits in.
I think this could be 1A, but it also could be like creating that cohesiveness.
Yeah, the 1E.
Yeah, and making the connections clear for the learner too.
It also helps demonstrate her disciplinary expertise.
Yep, I agree with that.
So I don't know, let's see.
We might be able to break it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Based on her response.
Prepare them for capstone. So there's this part down here, Nicole. Since acne is so common, there will be questions on their pharmacy licensure exams. This is one of those examples of where I might put that in 4F, right? Yeah. Sorry to jump ahead.
No, but that happens with their responses, right? Sometimes it touches on other elements.
So I'm going to just grab this for a second, oops, and put that in 4F. Since I'm spotting that, because that's where I see her acting in service to her students, like thinking ahead to what they need to know as part of the standard of ethical care. Okay, that was a nice little piece. And then I'm going to put this in 1A.
I agree.
Sorry, that's gotta make your head a little spinny when I keep scrolling.
No, it's good to see that you do the same thing I do. You have to scroll up and down.
You do. Okay, so I'm now on what specific prior knowledge and skills do students need to be successful in reaching the learning goals of the lesson? I don't know how to spell these things, so we've got some I don't. Med chem is a thing. This is pathophysiology. So those are I'm going to leave them.
We'll go
Okay.
back to that later. It's okay.
Prior knowledge and skills.
Part of that is 1B again, because
It
that's,
is.
yep.
Yep. Go ahead. Go ahead and say what you're going to say.
Well, I think that's part of, knowing and valuing what your students are, where they are, but also, in some of that, in an online course, that actually would look also to the organization of that space, right? Because she just started talking about the way that modules were organized too.
So when you're doing this, Nicole, like we already have evidence in 1B, do we keep putting evidence there, or do you keep putting evidence there, or do you just kind of stop? Like I've already got it.
I keep putting it there exactly how you did to break up the paragraphs, because I like to show them that like there's a lot there. They're doing a lot there in respect to that standard. I think that's a positive.
Good. One of the things that you'll notice that I do, and I don't know if you do this or not, but I do write from like first person. Like I'm Jenna's voice, right? So I don't say she said. I'm like working from the I try to bring relevance in. I'll make those connections from them. So I'm writing from Jenna's voice. Do
And
you
then
do that, or do you use third person?
I think I do both, depending on the format and how they respond. Now, do you continue that throughout? Because
I do that in the pre and the post. Now, when I'm in the actual, you'll see it in a second when we get down to the class visit, then I use third person there,
okay.
like Jenna or Dr. Mills or whomever, Professor Mills.
Do we have a preference, or do we want first person? It makes sense because we're asking them the questions.
I'm trying to capture their words and not use my words in place of their words. And so that's why I default to the I.
So the pre-visit discussion and the post-visit discussion are then in first person, and the visit is more third person.
If you're comfortable with that, right? And we can talk to our group too,
Absolutely.
but I think
That's a good way to look at it.
it helps you keep it in their mindset. Okay, jump into number 5. How do you become familiar with prior knowledge and skills that your students bring to this and other lessons? Prior knowledge and skills. Is that still 1B? Oh, wait, I'm jumping.
I also think that sometimes we see that at least in the class visits for online courses, we also see that they are prompting and asking discussions in the discussion boards, and like some instructors have at the beginning of the semester, at the beginning of the module, like almost like pre-assessment to see where the students are with that knowledge.
Mhm,
Could be as the instruction is occurring, they're asking those questions.
mhm.
Um, I think it could be, but this is a face-to-face.
I also wonder if some of this is 1C, like the instructional outcomes are rigorous and appropriate for students. Like this demonstrates like the why of, I can gauge what they've talked about in the other courses, piggyback on that. I don't know.
So has she asked, and maybe this would have been a question we could have asked as a follow-up question. How did she know? Will you scroll up just a
Yeah.
little? How, like, I guess a follow-up question could be how do you have a sense of what's happening in terms of, and then making those connections of where the students actually are.
Yeah, that could be a good follow-up question. I'm gonna skip it right. I'm gonna skip 5 right now, and see what we have in 6, 7, and
And that's
see.
okay. Sometimes that happens, you
Yeah,
know.
sometimes we don't use all of it. How do you plan to teach today's lesson? What methods are you using? So, I'm thinking like this is probably gonna go into E1E potentially, but I'm not sure. So I start with lecture objectives. I need to build a foundation. Um, so it's lecture to build a foundation is what I'm seeing there.
Yes, and this is definitely, I think, how what you're hearing the plan for how that instruction occurs.
Hmm.
Definitely. The activities, and the structure and the flow.
Okay.
This for me is, yeah, 1E.
I'm gonna sneeze. Or maybe not, now that I said it out loud. Oh, goodness.
I don't think I realized that you had a touch screen.
Yeah, I like
I don't know if that makes it easier to scroll or
sometimes it does. Sometimes when I can't get a hold of my mouse or whatever, or get my cursor. Okay. How do you evaluate? So we're in the assessment.
Mhm.
So we use low stakes, high stakes assessments. I write my exam questions first by copying my objectives into a Word doc. Low stakes, I've developed quiz questions. There are checkpoints during the content. This gives them a breather. If there's no answer, it's a clue for me to go back and cover information. So when we look at assessments, they're planned throughout the instructional process. So that's she has checkpoints during the content of her lecture. They get feedback right away in the class. And then, so I'm going to put that one in 1F. Are you good with that?
Yeah. I mean, she's talking about alignment to the outcomes and formative as well as, where.
Summative assessment. Yeah, she has them both.
Mhm.
This is slow. That's why I'm going to do this. And we said that was going in 1F. Do you anticipate places where students will struggle? I taught this last year for the first time. I think the drugs are relatively straightforward since they've learned most of these, so that shouldn't be a speed bump. They might have trouble at the end. What do you recommend and why? Um, so, and she's the co-author on the textbook chapter. That's very cool. Um,
I think this could be 2B and fostering a culture for learning and that support aspect of it. You have those high expectations for learning, but also the support.
yeah. I also see it as a little bit of that 4F. You have a responsibility to patients to be up to date. So I'm including new information that's up to date.
Break this one up. Yep.
I'm going to start with that. And then we were thinking too, sorry. to be,
Yes.
right? All right. Now, here's my question for you. Like right now we have a hole in 1D. Do you go look for the hole now, or do you just keep going through your document and wait?
Yes. I just keep going through the document.
I do too. So now I would be going into the actual
Mhm.
class visit.
And then I think, those are, if we find we have holes like that, then those are questions that we can ask in the post-visit discussion, right? So we can just follow up with, questions of clarity or just trying to understand. And sometimes though, I think they come out in the class visit as well, but if they
Yeah,
don't, ask in the class, the post-visit.
that's a really good point. So you're saying that you usually go and start doing your cut and pasting before?
Yes.
Smart. Yeah, that's a good move.
That way, and I might not get all of it, but that way, if there are things that we need to ask about, we have an idea of what those are before we go into that discussion.
Mhm.
And a lot
Okay.
of times, when I do this with somebody else, they're the same questions. Like we have the same holes and we need to ask the same questions.
Yep, agreed. Okay, so we're moving into the actual class. Um, she starts with the good morning, which I probably would put in the 2A of evidence of like that. Are you good with that? She's greeting them or the good morning, how are we? Happy Tuesday. I know there are 2 hours of immuno this morning. Yeah.
Those are both examples of cultivating that. I want to say affirming, welcoming, sense of belonging. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna go down to 2A. It seems like a little thing, but it means a lot.
It does. It builds positive relationships right at the onset.
Do you do any abbreviating when you work like in that space? Like I do JM or whatever, just
Yeah, and then sometimes if I'll go back and like sometimes I'll use S for students and I'll go back and that's just habit though, T and S. And I'll go back and update it before I send the final version.
okay. So we've got good morning. I'm just kind of looking at my domain 2 and 3, but as we're walking through this.
Mhm.
So we have routines, we have behavior, spaces for learning, communicating purpose about content. So she went over the objectives for this session.
These were
So
like
that,
screen. Yeah, perfect.
yeah, so that's going to be 3A, right?
Yep. So it's not just there's a difference between, planning for that and setting those instructional outcomes, which we see in domain 1. And now you're seeing that actually enacted. She's communicating that to the students. Those are two different things.
Yep. Okay. So we have our moving into the lecture talking about acne, pathophysiology of acne. Um, Humidos.
I appreciate the slide where it said where at 10:05 she followed with a slide that was a visual of what she had just reviewed. So you see some summary of what she's reviewing, as well as a visual representation. So that kind of addresses the needs of different types of learners um,
Mhm.
in that space, which it could be something that she planned because she has that in the lesson ahead of time. So that's using her, resources obviously effective to support her different types of learners.
Yeah, that's what I was just looking. I'm gonna put that in. Are you okay with that?
Because sometimes we'll see, the slides are, just text based, and that's a comment sometimes. And when I see that and I'm observing, you might want to include a visual representation of this to help your visual learners. So I think she did that, planned for that.
Okay, that's going in 1D. She has, are there any questions? This is at 1019, talking about non-pharmacologic therapies. She noted that there's a handout on Canvas. It's there if you are curious. So I kind of like that for
Maybe
three.
3B.
Yeah, I was thinking 3C. You're thinking 3D. I'm sorry.
B as in boy, sorry.
3B is in
Just
boy.
questioning to kind of see where
Yeah.
they are with the but also, just participation as well.
Yeah, I almost think 3C because I think, are there any questions? It's kind of a generic question versus like when we hear them asking probing questions, that's like a questioning technique. I don't know how, I mean, talk to me about how you think about questions in a classroom.
I think one of my recommendations here would have been, and someone shared this with me one time when in respect to my own teaching, instead of asking, are there any questions? What are the questions you
Are
have?
the questions you
Because,
have?
that's an opportunity to frame it, because I think it said the students didn't have any questions or didn't respond. Um, if you ask, what questions do you have? And then, you have wait time, you're kind of not, it's not a yes, no.
Yeah, yeah, I like that a lot. I'm actually going to add that here and share that with Jenna. And I'm going to put that in the instructor or in the observer, whatever, the visitor section.
I like your wording, maybe try, or like I use the might consider a lot.
Yeah, yeah, it's not a mandate, it's just a
You
suggestion, right?
will. Jenna, yeah, you see that again in 1027. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah,
So be specific, what questions do you have about benzoyl peroxide?
right.
Question.
That's a good, really good point. All right, what do you see as you're looking through some of these? Um, we have some 3A.
There
We have,
must
go ahead.
an organization there, that organization of spaces for learning in terms of the routine, because you have at 1022 some students listened, some took notes, so they must be used to the format that she's using, and they've decided what works best for them in terms of engaging with that, because some of them are just listening and some of them are actually taking notes as well. This
Yeah,
must
that's a
format.
good point.
So that would that for me is, let me see if I get that right. Two, is it two?
2E is
E.
organization spaces for learning.
Um,
It's also, there's positive behavior. Mm,
and even I think it goes back to that cohesive instruction too, but
I think 2E is really difficult because we don't have much control over our spaces.
Yep. We find that when we do the online um, courses as well, in terms of what do we mean by space, right?
Mhm.
That's why I think when you have maybe thinking big picture about what do we need mean for
Mhm.
space for learning.
Yeah.
Um,
So here's how I read 2C. Like 2C, shared routines and so on. So for instance, if I'm in a classroom where they take attendance in a particular way that doesn't disrupt like the time of class, like I could take attendance by calling off everybody's name, but then I'd lose 5 minutes of instruction, right? Versus handing around a sign up sheet, or Katie August does this, like little icebreaker at the beginning of class where they have a question of the day, and that's how she builds community and she takes attendance. So that's one of the things I look for 2C is like, are there routines in the class, passing around papers, or like like you said, like sitting down and opening my computer and starting to take notes. Um, that is part of a routine that's been established. So I just in case, I don't know if you have other ways of thinking about 2C.
no, I mean, I think the same way. I think this one could go under 2C, 2E. It can go in multiple places. My initial thought was when I said the routine was 2C. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna grab this one, which is very similar to what we just had, and I'm gonna put it in 2C.
Mhm. And it's okay if they go in multiple places or
Yep.
different places. And it will look different from, you know, instructor to instructor, different
I'm going to
from.
just put in a little note, evidence of routine there, because that might not be clear to everybody who looks at that. So I
I do that
added,
too. I do that too. I'll add it at the end of the sentence. I'll say like something like this is an example of, a routine that the students have in this class, that they know that based on whatever their individual learning style is, that's how we can interact with the content and the instructor.
okay, so let's go back. I just want to make sure we didn't miss anything here. So we have a quick checkpoint here because I'm talking quite a bit. She brought up a slide with a multiple choice. So this is going to be,
It
it
could
could be a,
be C, engaging them in the learning.
I also think it's a 3D because they're getting a formative assessment right there in class to see if they understand,
Yeah,
right?
definitely.
Okay, I'm going to grab it.
And I like that you thought of that 3D in terms of formative assessment, like instruction, assessment that's occurring during the instruction and not just summatively.
Right. So 3. So this is one of the things, like when I'm looking at this and kind of reflecting as I'm going, I'm like, oh, based on our little discussion about her questioning techniques, not that we wouldn't have anything to put here because I think she does have questioning techniques, but it could be an area that could be enhanced, right?
Mhm. And I think that you can kind of see that theme. A lot of the questions are, yes, no. How can you just, which is great that we're asking questions, but how can you reframe those so that they're maybe higher level?
Yeah, because I want to, just if we do use this for training or whatever, I want to just reiterate that this was a great class. This is how you take it to the next level, right? And why you participate in these things.
And how you find those small adjustments, because it's truly a very small adjustment, right? Just one word in these questions from do to how, are. how.
Okay. One of the things that I sometimes grab when I'm in domain 3, or it's not domain 3, rather, when I'm in the course visit, is I look for information that shows the instructor's understanding of content, their disciplinary expertise, if I don't already have that. Do you ever do that?
Yes. I
So
think,
like the one A,
because even right there, like she discussed, I don't know how to say these words, etc. That's FDA approved. Like this is showing her expertise in her content knowledge and even truthfully where where this is right now, right? That has been FDA approved. She clearly is demonstrating expertise in her discipline.
so too. And there's a spot that I'm gonna get another one in a minute that I want to grab. So this is 1A. She talks about something being hot off the press. Um, it's towards the end. Yeah. She's summary slides and AAD guideline recommendations. This is hot off the press. Like, to me, that demonstrates that she is getting the most up-to-date information. And I don't know if we want to put that in 1A or if we think it should go somewhere else. What do you think? Is that like a
Um,
4E?
yeah, you could definitely say it's 4E, right, too. Um,
I know we're struggling with 4E, whether we think it's appropriate to keep in a higher ed setting. Does it, I mean, is it really more about HQPD for us? But let's put it there as we're still having this conversation,
yeah,
right?
definitely.
Um, Talks about a quiz on Canvas.
That's
Anything, go ahead.
I think that's, using your instructional resources, right? Using your Canvas, your learning management system to enhance and engage students in what they're doing.
Mhm.
That's also that could also fall under your formative assessment. That one could fall under multiple. Um,
Yeah, it could go in multiple places, right? It's a good piece of evidence.
mhm. And it for that one, it speaks to the technology piece of that as well because she's using Canvas. Mhm. And it's okay to have it in multiple places, as we're doing this. Sometimes you will have that piece of evidence in multiple places.
This 3E, so responding flexibly to student needs. I'm usually looking for something where, somebody had a question and maybe, what do you look for there?
Yeah, I think actually I saw that. She said Jordan asked a question, the student Jordan, and she responded to right there.
Yeah,
Um,
there might have been another one.
two students asked questions.
I wish I had put a little more detail there. That's on me.
We learned that though.
Yeah.
Right. I find that I'm thinking that sometimes too. I wish I would have expanded on this just a little.
Right, especially when it's a little time in between.
And that brings up a good point though, as you're working through this. If it's okay if we don't have every box, if you will, with evidence, that it doesn't always work out that way.
Right.
And that-
Agreed.
and another opportunity to where maybe you ask a clarifying question about that in the post visit discussion.
And if there's not something there, remember it's only one class visit, right? So that doesn't mean that the person doesn't do that, but yeah,
That's true when you do online course visits too. I do those a lot. And, you're just looking at one module. We're not like looking at the entire course. We don't have time to do that through this process, right? You're just looking at one snapshot in one module. So you might not see some of these things. Whereas, if you maybe went through the whole course, you could find it. We're just looking at that one visit, if you will, that one module.
right. So let's go to the post questions and answers and see what we have there. And then we'll look and see like, okay, where do we still have holes? And if there are holes, whether we're like, we're okay that there's a hole there, or we feel like, maybe we need to go back and search a little bit more.
Mhm.
Um, so we are considering your instructional goals. How do you think the lesson went? She was happy with it. Students often ask questions. A couple of students shared their own experiences. Um, she was happy with the checkpoint questions. She felt good in the moment. So you and I were talking about this a little bit earlier. One of the things that we hope to see in the reflection is that the person's reflection mirrors, or your as the visitor and the instructor's reflections mirror one another, right? Um, I would agree that what she describes there is accurate
Mhm.
from my um, time in the classroom. So I would probably put that in 4A.
Yes, I agree. It's her self assessment of teaching, of her teaching.
Now, let's say hypothetically you don't agree with her reflection. What do you do?
I would ask, and actually this has happened, and I would ask clarifying questions. So help me understand how you, I don't remember what her exact words were, but, or can you explain to me further what you mean by, or how did you see this in the classroom? Like when you said, hopefully they feel comfortable enough. Why did you think that, how do you know they felt comfortable? Or what are some examples of how you think they felt comfortable?
Yeah, I agree. The clarifying questions are important. And in that moment, like if you're like, oh, wow, in your head, you're thinking, I didn't see the same thing you saw, that's a point where you can ask additional questions. If you get to the end of those additional questions and you still don't feel like you're matching up,
Mhm.
I probably would copy and paste that down into 4A, and I would add a note that said, here, this is the instructor's answer, here's my answer.
And and I mean, like she says, I was happy with the checkpoint questions. Um, what made you happy about the
Yeah,
checkpoint questions, right? And
yeah,
those are questions you can ask right away in the moment.
yeah.
Was one thing like in one of the post visits discussions we had, there was a question about like the accuracy of the content, and so the cares team member and I, both of us, asked kind of similar questions about the content,
Hmm.
just to for clarification purposes.
Right. All right, so I'm looking at number 2, where the methods and activities you use effective, yes or no. Um, we have our answers. I mean, if we felt like we needed, do we feel like we need to add that anywhere?
Um, I do think she's showing that her flexibility in terms of, I can post an announcement if anything needs corrected after looking at that quiz. I'll know more after. That's that for that sentence right there. I can post an announcement if anything needs corrected after looking at the quiz. That's showing me that she's responding flexibly to the needs of those students, like in the moment as as the class is being enacted.
So we want to put that back in 3E.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you saying that because I'm pretty focused on just what happens in the class, but I agree that that is that's something that we could put in 3E. Sorry, I went the wrong direction.
I know. I wonder if we could color code or something to make it easier.
Like to go from one section to the other. I know.
Yeah,
That's
so even if it's kind of, the pre-visit questions are, one color, just so
yeah.
easier to find
And
it.
each of the domains, I don't know,
Yeah.
we're gonna run out of colors, but I agree to find it quickly. Materials, were the materials you used effective? So she has checkpoint questions, quiz, assessment. I can see what needs to be reworded or emphasized. Sometimes after class is over, I'll go and create a slide. That's good reflection, right? Where,
Good reflection.
yeah. So let's put that on 4A, right?
Yep. And I like that she says too, we record all of our lectures so students can go back and review. That's a great way of using resources too effectively and supporting the students and the different learning styles because sometimes our students who have accommodations, they have to ask for that. And it's great. I think that she's kind of saying, well, I'm just going to do that regardless. You don't have to come to me and ask.
Yeah. I'm gonna go grab that.
It's right there. Yeah.
Yep.
We record all of our lectures. Students can go back and review.
And we're
I
gonna
also
put
like
that.
that she brings up her office hours too.
Mhm. We're gonna put that one back in resources. Oh my goodness. Let's see. So I keep a paper copy on my desk so I can flip back and forth between my paper copy and the one here.
I need to do that. We should ask the Danielson people to make a pretty version. Like QM has their rubric printed off in like a book form. We need the same thing.
Oh, in a book form. Yeah, that would be cool. Maybe we could just have Haley help us do that.
Yes, that would be great because I feel the same way as we're doing this. I want to be referencing it. So I have to switch out of the Zoom, look at it, and come back into the Zoom.
I'm just looking at my paper version. Okay, here's one of my favorite questions. If you're going to teach this lesson again, what would you do differently? What would you do the same? So I felt rushed towards the end. My goal is 5 checkpoints. There were only 3 in this lesson. I'd like more hands-on interaction. So this gave us some good stuff to talk about afterwards. Like how could she get more interaction and more interactive content? And then the thing that she liked was her flow, going through each individually. So again, to me, this is accurate reflection. I was just looking to see if I thought any of it would go into 4B, but I don't think so.
Although she is for 4B, she is focusing on, whether they met her objectives, goals.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not so much though whether the students met the goal, she didn't meet her goal.
Yeah, she's talking about her for herself, which puts it into 4A.
I'm just going to grab some of this and put it into 4A.
She's rocking the reflective practice. Sometimes you'll find, you'll have a lot of evidence like she does, and then some, it's like you have to ask them a little bit more about the reflective practice. It just really depends on the person.
Right. Okay, based on what happened today, what do you plan to do at the next class? Short term will be a quiz. I'll come back a few minutes for final exam review. Derm disorders. And then the next one, how do you engage in reflective practice and develop professionally? So looking at these two boxes, I'm kind of looking at 4E. I think number 6 is pretty much just going to go into 4E.
Yes, agree. Which supports the argument to keep 4E.
It does.
Back in it goes. We're still learning.
It's good though.
It is very good.
Okay. And
The last question was designed for that 4F a lot.
F. Mhm.
I
So
think
here she's an advisor and helps with the Honor Society. So that's definitely service to the students that's connected to her discipline.
and what she's teaching in this course.
Yeah. So this is all good for 4F. All right. So I'm going to just go back to the beginning of the Danielson framework where we have our evidence. 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D, 1E, we have something there, 1F. Into 2, we have something for A and B, C and D. I don't really have anything for E. So think about that. That's the learning spaces. So this one, co-creation and shared ownership, like if they are helping like teach the lesson, if they're working in small groups and have some ownership of the content of the lesson, I might put that into E. Are there other things that you put into E?
Yeah, so when we do the online course visits, this is when, like, say that an instructor is using the discussion space, the discussion boards and Canvas to maybe do peer editing. They're working on collaborating together to maybe do a group project, and that space is used. So again, being very intentional about designing that discussion for, shared experiences with the students.
Yeah, and so one of the things that Jenna and I talked about was when she is doing her quizzes, those little mini quizzes in class, those checkpoints, I suggested that she turn at least a couple of them into think, pair, shares. So the students are talking to one another and trying to come up with their answers versus just figuring it out individually. And that would do two things, right? One, some students come up with the answer very quickly, and then they offer an answer and the answer is accepted and the instructor moves on. This is a deterrent to students who think or process their information a little bit more slowly, because they're like, then after a while, they don't even try. They're just like, I'll just sit and let somebody else answer, right? So I think like there would be room when you're doing that kind of quiz in the moment. Sometimes you have to move through it quickly and you want people to just answer, but other times you might say, hey, talk to your neighbor, come up with an answer together, and then call on groups across the class. And that would be a 2E piece, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. So 2B, we know she has questioning techniques, but the questions that we saw were all closed. And so that doesn't really support critical thinking. We can put it in here, but what are your thoughts there?
I think that's an opportunity for a small adjustment that we
I do.
identified.
Yep. Agreed. Opportunity for a small adjustment. We have a 3C, a 3D, a 3E. We have 4A evidence, lots of it. Documenting student progress. I know we have this because she's using her quizzes to document their progress and their understanding. So we can pull some evidence.
Yes, that we already have. And yeah, absolutely. Even where she's talking about the checkpoints too.
Yeah.
She's monitoring student progress.
I'm just going to pull this from 3D and copy it into that spot because it can work for both places. And she is trying to figure out student mastery and where they are in their learning. 4C, cultural responsive engagement. Demonstrates a clear value for the role they play in student learning, respect and cultural competence, community values, instructional program, engagement, and learning experiences.
I think it sounded like that engagement piece is something that another small opportunity for a small adjustment that you had talked about with her is how to get those students more engaged, which speaks to 4C.
I agree. And it wasn't that the students were off task. They were definitely, you know, listening and taking notes, but how can they like be more engaged in a demonstrative way in their learning in the classroom? I think that's a small adjustment. There's plenty of evidence for 4E and lots of 4F. Sorry, you go ahead.
No, I said and F. Yeah, definitely.
Yep. So in the recommendations and ideas, we're going to put in open up questioning techniques beyond the to, what's the word I want here? To
Promote
encourage,
critical thinking, reflection, application, some of the higher level blooms.
good. Also, we are going to say, I'm going to use this, try, good, because we are here to not create demands upon people, but provide suggestions, right? Consider integrating some think, pair, share opportunities during the quiz.
Engage more with the content and even each other.
I'm just going to say in support of their learning, the idea that they should be learning together, not just as individuals within the classroom, right? Were there other things that we said?
You always have 3 there?
Not always. And I think we also want to say, don't we want to change this wording, small adjustments?
Yeah.
Recommend ideas for small, well, I guess it's not always small adjustments. In this case, it is.
Yeah, most cases it's not.
Most cases, it's small adjustments. I'm just going to go back through one more time. There's the questioning. That has to do with co-creation. We hit that in the suggestion. I was just going to go back and look through my sidebar notes. I just have a little pause a moment there for checkpoints, but that's not a big deal. I had, along with the checkpoints, having students, instead of just giving the answer, explaining how they got the answer or why they gave that answer. So when they did their checkpoints, like they would give the answer and then they would move on. As a learner in the class myself, sometimes I wanted to know why they came up with that answer. I think I knew, but I didn't always know. You see what I'm saying?
Yes. I think that's part of opening up those questions, and that includes when a student provides an answer to a question, follow up.
How about that? Is that okay?
Yes.
All right. So at this point, I probably will do a quick proofread. I don't really have any additional notes, but I'm just going to add my official signature. I'm going to put a date on it. And I'm going to call it good. And then I'm going to send it to Nicole. So it gets uploaded somewhere. SharePoint soon. All right. Any questions or any other thoughts from you, Nicole?
Looks good.
Okay. All right. Thank you, ma'am.